Hi, everybody. It's Jessica Stone at Stansberry Research with Kim Iskyan, who I've reached on the line in Singapore. He, of course, is our international editor and someone I wanted to talk to about the fact that the WTO, the World Trade Organization, the leader of the WTO, has decided to leave early. And Kim, from your vantage point, what do you think that means in terms of an opportunity to lead in a different direction, perhaps, or even reinvent the organization altogether?
Jessica, the WTO is pretty much the regulator of global trade, and it's been a key force behind globalization over the past several decades. Now, since the head of the WTO is leaving, and he's leaving because he said pretty much, there's nothing for me to do, nothing is happening anymore. There is an opportunity to kind of step back and say, okay, how could we do this differently? How could we do this better? And it is at a critical time for obviously the global economy with GDP around the world collapsing and trade becoming arguably all the more important for global growth.
Yeah, I mean, what he's saying there, right, is that the fact that the U.S. has blocked all the new judges from being appointed, there wasn't really, after the end of this year, an opportunity to mediate anyway. So effectively, all countries were going to have to go back to sort of hashing it out on their own after this year. What are your thoughts on what the next iteration, if there is one, could look like?
Well, I think it's kind of difficult because you either have one organization that helps coordinate everything, or else everybody goes about on their own. So there's just a string of bilateral deals between different countries. Now, that was what was the case before the predecessor to the WTO, the Global Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, that was created in 1948. Before then, there was pretty much a lag, or not a lag, just a total deficit of trade between World War I and World War II. And countries did whatever they could. And then after World War II, they said, all right, let's figure this out. And they came up with a different sort of arrangement. So in a lot of ways, the option now is to kind of go back to what was before. And you have different countries putting together bilateral agreements with each other.
And of course, that's something that President Trump basically says is the way he wants to do everything anyway. So I don't think he's going to be crying too hard in the White House. My question to you is, there are obviously reasons that are even outside of trade and economics that this was put together after World War II. And it has to do with avoiding conflict. So if we go back to a system where people are fighting bilaterally and there's no referee, do you foresee more conflict in the world as a result of this?
I think that's almost inevitable, because you look at, for example, the founding of the European Economic Community, the EEC, that was the predecessor to the EU. That was founded in the 1940s after the end of World War II, specifically to try to prevent future conflict between countries, because if countries trade with each other, they have a very strong incentive to not fight each other. And there's even something that was developed by Thomas Friedman, an idea called the Golden Arches Doctrine, that holds that countries that have McDonald's as a symbol of globalization, as a symbol of wanting to be open to others, countries that have McDonald's don't fight each other. And that's actually mostly held true, with a few exceptions depending on how you define conflict. But I think the chances that there is more conflict because because they have less economic incentive to not fight, the chances of conflict increase are strong.
And so, obviously now there's a lot more growth happening in emerging markets in the world who maybe they weren't really on the radar, almost 100 years ago when all of this was playing out. What are your thoughts on what this means for them in particular, and for the safety of investing in emerging markets, which I know is something you watch very closely?
There's this huge sort of disequilibrium. So if I'm Sri Lanka, there are three countries that I'm incredibly concerned about putting together a bilateral trade deal with, right? They're going to be China, India, and the United States. Now, where do you think Sri Lanka falls on the list of priorities for the United States?
Pretty low. Yeah, pretty low.
So you think of all those developing markets that are desperate to trade with the United States, but the United States really couldn't care less, because those countries are just a dot on the horizon. Whereas for those frontier markets, the United States is the giant they have to talk to. So I think it's actually a very bad thing, because a lot of smaller countries will have a difficult time getting traction and maintaining those sorts of beneficial, favorable deals that they have right now through the WTO.
Is this an opportunity for China then?
That's a huge opportunity. And it's actually almost less of an opportunity than an opportunity to continue what's already been happening. You look at the volume of trade between name your country in Africa, name your country in Latin America and China, and it bigfoots the trade with the United States. Brazil, for example, has double the exports to China than it does to the United States. So the United States pulling back is just an opportunity for China to further solidify and cement its very strong, already very strong position in a lot of these countries.
Thanks so much for your insight on what it means to have the WTO's president step down early and an opportunity to potentially redesign the World Trade Body. And if you would like to see much more content just like this, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for joining us. That's all for now.